Welcome to Pavinar's, Webinars for the Pavement Community. My name is Andrew Bram, and today we're going to talk about what I think is one of the most important things that we do in graduate school, and that is our proposal defense. So I kind of divide any graduate school experience into three different steps within the sequence. And this could be loosely applied for both a master's and doctorate graduate degree. So of course you're taking classes. I try and encourage my students to take a couple more classes in the early years so you have a little more time opened up in the later years, but you're taking classes. And in those early years, you're spending quite a bit of time not only taking classes, but also reading literature and trying to develop your experimental plan. So what are you going to look at? How are you going to look at? And that experimental plan really leads to what I call your experimental matrix. And also you're spending a lot of time training in the lab, learning how to use equipment, learning how to find your way around. And whether you're using materials or doing everything on a computer, there's a lot of training that's involved, either with software or equipment or those type of things. And then in the middle years, you actually collect the data for your either master's thesis or doctorate dissertation. And of course, you have to analyze the data, and this takes up a large amount of time. And this is what people tend to think of when they think of graduate school, and it does take quite a bit of time and effort. And then in the late years, you take all of that data you collected and analyze, and you write your thesis or dissertation. And then eventually you defend your thesis or dissertation. Well, while training, I encourage and I have all of my students do what I call a proposal defense. And that's during the early years, just before you start the meat of your data collection and analysis. So why do I think a proposal defense is important? Well, one, it organizes your thoughts on literature. It also allows you to establish the objectives of your experimental plan, and it cements your experimental matrix. At this time, you also set a timeline for your work. Those are kind of some of the nuts and bolts directly associated with your topic, but then it also helps you identify any holes or blind spots that you may have in all of the times or all of the items above. Did you miss some important literature? Is your objective off? Are you missing something from your experimental matrix? And this is something your committee can help you with. And during a proposal defense, this is an excellent time for your committee to give some feedback on things that may enhance the research that you're doing. And at the end of the day, it just introduces you to your committee. You get to meet them face to face, have a little talk with them, which is nice because you're very nervous generally during your either thesis or dissertation defense itself. Now, I think one of the largest benefits is it does prevent scope issues at the thesis or dissertation defense. And that's because if you and your committee decide that your literature is adequate, your objectives are adequate, your experimental matrix is adequate, and your timeline is adequate, if you do manage to achieve all of that and you present that at your thesis or dissertation defense, the committee's already agreed to it. So there'll be none of those uncomfortable conversations saying you need to do more work because you've done the work that everyone agreed on. So what's in a proposal defense? Obviously, there is the literature review. This is very important. And if you've watched my other Pavinars, you know I have some strong feelings on what makes a good literature review. Also, you want your objectives in your proposal defense, your experimental matrix, and your timeline, how you're going to lay out the work you need to get done. And during your proposal defense, you want two deliverables. You want to provide a Word document with this content, and then you also need to make a PowerPoint presentation as well. Now, you do want to provide both the Word document, you do want to provide the Word document to your committee at least 1 week before the proposal defense. This is just good common sense because you don't want your committee to have to read the material you develop the day before you present it. You want to give them a little bit of time, a little bit of flexibility. Now you can, if you've already prepared it, also provide the PowerPoint, but really the PowerPoint content and the Word document content should be very similar. So it's not necessary to deliver the PowerPoint, but you should deliver the Word document at least 1 week before your proposal defense. So let's dig a little more into the first four: the literature review, the objectives, the experimental matrix, and the timeline. Now, for the literature review, you want to provide a brief history of your topic, and it's really up to you how much you want to go into it. I'm in asphalt materials. If you want to start in the 1800s about when roads were starting to be built, that's up to you. You can spend a lot of time doing that, however, so sometimes it's a little beneficial to start more specifically on the topic you're working on, not necessarily on the global topic of whatever material you happen to be using or whatnot. Now, you want to make sure you capture what others have done in your area of research, and this can be both inside and outside of pavements, especially if you're working toward a dissertation. Often you're working on a topic that is not unique to your specific area, and so sometimes it's very beneficial to read what other areas are also doing. It gives you a different perspective. It gives you different ideas on how to understand things within your area. And what you want to do with your literature review is you want to find out what holes there are in the existing body of knowledge and how your work is going to fill those holes. So nothing drives me more crazy than literally reading a laundry list of papers. So just paragraph after paragraph after paragraph saying these people did this, these people did that, and on and on and on. Yes, that proves that you read papers, and it's important to read those papers and to show you read those papers. But don't just list the papers, paint a picture and talk about this is what's known and this is what's unknown. And based on what's unknown, this is what I'm doing to try and help that. So this is something that is very interesting to me and I'm quite passionate about. And at the end of the day, all the literature review is doing is it is providing a foundation for the decisions of your experimental matrix. So when you get to your objectives and your experimental matrix, you clearly show through literature that what you're doing is required. Now, I could talk a lot more about this. As I said, this is an area of great interest to me, and I've actually done a whole Pavinar on it, so you can just search Performing a Literature Review, which came out June 20th of 2021, and that goes into more details. Now, the objectives, this should be a standalone section. You should have a heading that says objectives, and in that section, you should only have your objectives. You want one sentence or phrase for each objective. You can have a single objective or you can have multiple objectives. It's really up to you. But these objectives should clearly indicate the topic of your paper. Now, it's kind of funny. When I was making this presentation, I went back to papers that me and my students have published, and I'm not consistent with this. All of my papers don't have an objective section, and some have one objective, some have multiple objectives, so there's no one right way to do it. But this is just some examples. So this first example is the overall objective of this paper was to examine the influence of different asphalt emulsions on the surface of field-aged beams or field-aged pavements that had been in service for multiple years using BBR mixture beams. The second one is this paper investigated the effects of chemical modified warm mix asphalt and the applications of reclaimed asphalt pavement on laboratory performance, both cracking and rutting, and compactability considering aging and moisture conditioning. Now, you'll notice that these two objectives get the gist of the entire paper. If you read this objective, you understand what the whole paper is. So in some ways, this is even like a condensed abstract. So in my mind, someone should be able to read the objective section and very clearly be able to understand what you're doing. And the nice thing is this reflects everything that's in the literature review, because with these two examples, we felt that no one had quite looked at this topic in quite this way. So objectives are very, very important in my mind. Now, for the experimental matrix, you need to show what sort of materials or what sort of properties you're going to look at. You need to talk about what kind of equipment you're going to use or what kind of software you're going to use. You need to talk about what sort of tests you're going to run and how you're going to analyze those tests. You need to talk about how many replicates you have, how many iterations there are. This is where you essentially say, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to do it. But you want to be very clear on how you're going to lay that out. So let's take a look at part of my dissertation. This was just one chapter of my dissertation, but I looked at 28 different asphalt mixtures. It was a partial factorial experiment, and I did a t-test for significance. And so I had 480 possible combinations. There's no way I was going to test 480 combinations. Thank you, Dr. Butler, for not making me do that. But I looked at different specimen geometries, 2 of them. I looked at 10 different asphalt binder types. I looked at 3 different testing temperatures. I looked at 2 different aggregate types, 2 different air voids, and 2 different asphalt binder contents. And you can see these are the levels that I did. I used the disc-shaped compact tension and single edge notch beam. I looked at a whole bunch of different asphalt binders, all based on the PG binder grade, all the way from a 58 -40 down to a 64 -22. I went to school at Illinois. That's a northern climate, so you see those softer binders. I looked at those 3 different testing temperatures, 2 degrees Celsius below, 10 degrees Celsius, and 22 degrees Celsius above the low binder grade temperature. So that 10 degrees Celsius above, that matched the BBR testing temperature, and then I went 12 degrees above and below the BBR testing temperature. I looked at limestone and granite. I looked at 4% and 7% air voids. And then I looked at the optimal asphalt binder content, and then I threw in another 0.5% of asphalt binder. So the nice thing about the experimental matrix is you can read the objective section and you know exactly what they're doing. And you can literally look at an experimental matrix and you know exactly what will be done in your experiment. So of course I need to talk about all these different things. I need to talk about, what specifications I use, what equipment I'm going to use in order to run this, all of these type of things. But at the end of the day, someone who knows about asphalt pavements should be able to look at this experimental matrix, just the table, and they should have a very, very good idea of what I'm going to be looking at. And then finally, for a timeline, there's a whole bunch of different ways to represent a timeline. For example, Gantt charts, logic networks, PERC diagrams. I'm sure there's others out there. These are the big 3 that I'm familiar with. This is just an example from an NCHRP proposal that I wrote. So, hey, when you are working in the real world, you need to write proposals to try and get funding. This is a timeline from a proposal I write, and it clearly shows the different tasks, the phases. It shows the time from the contract award in months, and it shows approximately how you're going to step through each of the work phases. I'm very happy to say that this proposal was accepted. That was an extremely exciting day for me, but this just clearly shows what you're going to do. And of course, there's going to be text saying what's in the literature review, what's in the phase 2 work plan, all those type of things. But this is, again, a summary. So between the objectives, between that experimental matrix, and between this timeline, someone should be able to just look at 2 figures and read one very short section and have a very good understanding of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Now, I also have another Pavinar called Project Management, where I go a little more into detail on how to develop, for example, this Gantt chart here. So if you want, you can take a look at that in your leisure as well. All right, so what's the good news to a proposal defense? Well, 1, the committee agrees to the content. So the committee may provide some additional resources to review, but this only increases your confidence in your knowledge area. Your committee has a lot of experience. They will know things that you are not aware of. And if the committee is a good committee, it will share that with you, and that will only make your thesis or dissertation better. Another nice thing is this proposal defense, it essentially becomes your thesis or dissertation defense. So this PowerPoint is the basis for your thesis or dissertation PowerPoint. The Word document is the basis for your actual thesis or dissertation document. So essentially, you're saving time later on. You're putting a lot of time into your literature review. You're putting a lot of time into your objectives, your experimental plan, and your timeline. All of that can be used in your actual final deliverables at the end of your graduate school experience. Now, along the way, after your proposal defense, you'll want to refresh your literature review. You obviously need to add your data and discussion, but you have a significant amount of your thesis and dissertation already written. And then finally, hopefully you'll be able to go to some conferences. Hopefully you'll be able to present some of your material. You're providing a foundation for all of your future presentations. You probably noticed that some of these Pavinars, I actually use content from other Pavinars, and that's fine. Someone might just want to watch this one, but you do reiterate some things overall. So these documents can definitely provide a foundation for any future presentation and any future paper that you write. So at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're saving time later on, and you're increasing your quality. And there's really no downside to that, in my mind. So for a recap, the proposal defense, it establishes your literature review, your objective or objectives, your experimental plan, and your timeline. It provides your buy-in from committee, and really at the end of the day, it's nothing but upside. You're saving time later, and you are increasing the quality of your work. So thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful day.